Coached the Wildcats to the state title game. Fell to Loveland in the 4A title game at Stoker Stadium back in 2003, but still a fantastic season for Fruita that year. Billy Moore joins us. Billy, I appreciate the time as always. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, Jim. It's always good to come on and talk to you about football. It's a lot of fun.
We enjoy having you on. Of course, we talked with you about the 2000 team, and your 2000 team moved on to the next round. Now it's your 2003 team that lost to Loveland. You faced Loveland once again. And let's go back to the playoffs, though, because you look at that 03 playoff run for your football team, none of those games were easy. You had beat Greeley West by a touchdown, 14-7, had to edge one out against Ralston Valley, 18-16, beat Pueblo South by a point, 14-13, before, of course, unfortunately lost to Loveland in the state title game, 34-13. But, boy, your team had to grind out some victories in the postseason to get to that state title game.
You know, we talk about this 2003 team. They're a team that they had to get better every week to have that opportunity. And these kids just were able to go back and look at their mistakes and just improve on what they learned from the game before, and they just got better. And we had some unfortunate things happen. Ryer Gear was our quarterback, and he went down, and Jake Wilson, who was a kid that was very capable of coming in but had never had any experience, had to come in and play quarterback for us, and he was able to keep us winning and keep us going. And those kids just we talk about a Sammy Safkin, who his leadership and never quit and never give up at anything, including when he had cancer. He just never gave up. He didn't pass away from cancer. He just passed away from all the things that came from all the treatments. And, that's the tenacity that team had that carried them all the way to the state championship. It was just one of those kind of teams that just kept going.
Former Fruita Monument football coach Billy Moore joining us, talking about his 2003 Fruita Monument football team that made it to the state title game. And let's go back and talk about Sam Safkin. Of course, Sam, as you mentioned, had that battle with cancer when he was at Northern Colorado, and just such a wonderful young man. Loved Sam. Was a tremendous leader for your football team, a tremendous leader on that line for your Wildcats back in 2003.
Sammy knew the offense probably better than I did, and he could make decisions on the line of scrimmage that would help everybody out. And it just, those kind of kids you can't replace them when you lose them. And Sam was one of those kind of kids that when you look at the whole thing, Sammy was one of the kids that really contributed to that team. And, he didn't really have a lot of wrestling experience. He goes out for wrestling and he comes on and wins the state championship. So that says a lot about his character.
I want to get back to the quarterback spot because Ryer Gear went on to play a tight end at Colorado, played Division I, had some time in the NFL as well. You had two entirely different players at the quarterback spot with Jake Wilson and with Ryer Gear. Ryer, big, physical guy. Jake was smaller, shiftier. It was kind of an interesting dynamic where you had two entirely different players that helped you win at that position in that 2003 season.
Yeah, Ryer was the kind of kid that he could just control the game for you. We had him at quarterback when we tried to do some of the read option stuff. Kind of let him run the ball as much as we could do. We wanted him to have the ball in his hands a lot, and so he really did. But when he got hurt, Jake, who had been playing football since he was 5 years old, understood the game plenty well enough to come in, and we didn't know for sure. He hadn't had any reps. He just wasn't. He was green. He came in and was able to run the veer like he'd been doing it all his life. And so with those two kind of kids coming in and doing things for you, you just don't lose much, and it really helped that team just continue on and improve and get better.
Former Fruita Monument football coach Billy Moore with us today on the Jim Davis Show on the team. Flip it over to your defense. I mentioned how you had to win all those close games to get to the state title game. Your defense played a big role in that. And Cody Walker, who was a 3-time All-South Western League linebacker, went on to play at Mesa. Cody Walker played a big role in the success of your defense.
Well, Cody being a middle linebacker for our defense was vitally important because a lot of times he was the guy that we determined wasn't going to be covered up. We tried to cover up one of our linebackers with trying to get a good defensive lineman that could create a double team and let one guy run loose. But Cody was so strong and so agile that he was the one linebacker that we said we didn't have to cover up, and he could take on a blocker and still get to the play. And as you know, that makes a lot of difference when you can have a kid like that can take that role. It really takes a lot of pressure off one of the linebackers, and that really helped us a whole lot, because Cody was that kind of a kid. And I remember when we were at Greeley West, we decided to punt the ball, but it was all because we knew the defense could really control the game for us, and we punted the ball and they held and we won that game. And that was a vitally important thing for us.
We've talked about some of the key names from that 2003 season on both sides of the football, but let's go back to the offensive side. So maybe some players that were kind of unsung a little bit for you, Bill, on that offensive side that certainly deserve being brought up once again about the contributions they made to your team being able to get to a state title game.
Well, our tailback was Brandon Warnke, and Brandon just came on. I remember going down to Durango, and Durango had a good team that year. Geez, Brandon just came into his own that game. It was amazing to watch how he could cut against the grain at the line of scrimmage because they were flying so hard to our first step, and he was able to cut back and just turn the game around for us on that. And then we just had other kids that, Ted West was at fullback, and Tyler Ryan being at tight end was a 3-year starter for us and had been, around a long time. So he was able to lead and contribute on that line, and just kids that you wouldn't have thought of that were able to come in. I remember Ted West. We had to teach Ted how to hang on to the ball because his first 2 or 3 games he just fumbled so much. But after that, he was a vital, important part. I know against the Pueblo South in the semifinals, and it was a cold, wet night, and Ted just took that game under control and ran for a lot of yards and never fumbled the ball. So there were a lot of kids that just improved and really contributed to what that team was able to do.
What about on the defensive side for you?
We have a lot of kids. We had a lot of kids that went both ways. So we talk about Sammy played on that defensive line.
Right.
We had Jake Wilson was a defensive back, and Ryer Gear, when he was there, was a defensive end. And we had a lot of kids that went both ways and contributed on both sides of the ball. And it was just, Coach Goff was our defensive coordinator at the time, and he took a lot of time, and he would make sure that our defense was in the right position for any formation that they would come up with. They just took a lot of time to do that. And it takes a lot of team effort to have a team like that could come in and improve and do all the things that they did towards the end of the year.
Former Fruita Monument football coach Billy Moore joining us today, talking about his 2003 Fruita Monument Wildcats. They're on our Western Slope High School football showdown against the champions of the 1957 season in 2A football, the Grand Junction Tigers. And Billy, let's talk about that title game at Stoker Stadium. You get Loveland again. Of course, going back to 2000, you had to play at their place. This time you get them at Stoker Stadium. Unfortunately, though, that the matchup in 2000 was a close game, which we talked about a lot with the Jeff Rosenberg should have been a catch and ended up not being ruled a catch and would have won the game for you. This time you face Loveland in the title game, and Loveland wins it 34-13. And Buckeye Boy and myself were talking about one of our memories of that game, which had nothing to do with anything on the field. Well, at least the two students for Fruita Monument, they got kicked out of the stadium for wearing they dressed up as cans of Pam because we had found out that Loveland had been using cooking spray on their jerseys to make them slick. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole and everything, but just take us back to that day, because certainly we thought that, boy, you had a really good shot at taking down Loveland, and it didn't work out that way for you that day back in 2003.
Yeah. I had to laugh when you mentioned that. That was a pretty funny thing, and that was a pretty awesome. I remember those two kids walking outside the gates. They wouldn't let them come into the game. It was funny, but yeah, it was definitely something that. I heard Jeremy Bloom talk in front of an audience, and he brought up the mention that they had warned Pam, and that's probably what they're going to be known more for than winning a state championship. But beside that, there were some great players on that field for Loveland.
Jeff Byers.
Jeff Byers,
yeah,
the number one lineman that was recruited that year in the whole nation was on that field, and he was definitely a kid that you had to contend with. He could pull and go out and get on a corner, and you didn't want to see him coming at you if you were a 165-pound corner. You just didn't want Jeff Byers coming at you. And that was quite a thing. We had lost our nose guard that year, and when we played Loveland the first time, we played them pretty tight because our nose guard could make Jeff Byers not pull, and that was really a big thing. And when we lost Dan Torres earlier in the year, it kind of hurt us a little bit. And when it came to that game, it was hard because Jeff could just kind of run around and do whatever. But they also had a running back that was able to just keep him in the game. He was fast and he was durable, and he just did a lot of good things. So, you can't say there was a lot of good players on the field that day, just like it was in 2000.
Yeah, Jeff Byers went on to win the gold helmet, too, for the state's best player. So a very talented player. The career after that didn't quite materialize the way his prep career did, but still was one heck of a football player. So any other final thoughts, memories, Billy, back to that 2003 season you want to share with us?
I just think that team was the thing that I remember about them was that they were just able to continue on, and they had a lot of setbacks. And even with the setbacks, their attitude was that they could go on and win. And I think part of that was that we had 6 years or 7 years of going deep into the playoffs, and those kids it was something that was there that was pride, and they just had to continue that pride that program had for so many years. And I think that was a leading contributing factor that those kids just said, hey, we're not going to let this program down. We're going to continue on with all the tradition that they've had and being successful and making it deep into the playoffs. We're not going to be the team that stops that tradition. So, that's where I see that team more than any other team.